Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to Business Innovators Radio. I'm your host, Emilio Silvera, and today with me is a really special guest. Now, if you've ever lived in an area that's been undergoing some type of construction or expansion, you might have heard of the acronym NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, our special guest expert today knows all about NIMBY and NIMBY fights. He is Patrick Slevin. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, Patrick, I know that from looking at your bio, you have a consulting firm named SL7 Consulting based out of Florida, and you have a lot of corporate clients, even representing some Fortune 50 companies and multinational corporations. But what I found really interesting is that you were elected one of the youngest mayors in the country not too long ago in Florida. Tell me a little bit about how you got elected mayor and how you ended up using that experience to start your consulting firm.
Very good. Thank you for that. And I appreciate you saying a little bit ago, 1996, I was elected mayor of Safety Harbor, Florida, which is located in the Tampa Bay area. I was 27 at the time. And really that experience as a mayor in one of the most urbanized regions in the country gave me this plethora of education and experience on this phenomenon known as NIMBY. And NIMBY is widely known but vaguely understood. And it really does stand in the crosshairs of what I like to say, America loves progress, but Americans hate change. It's the devil you know.
That's good.
Thank you. It's that devil you know that really underwrites the status quo attitudes that are driven by fear of change that leads to this NIMBY phenomenon. And that's really where I start coming in as a public affairs consultant and grassroots influencer on helping developers who come into these communities with their residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use, retail, infill, affordable housing, energy, you name it. When they come into a local community, they're trying to get the license to operate. And what stands between them and approval is usually neighbors or some kind of stakeholders who don't want to see change happen. And so I'm here today to discuss why does that happen, and how can you resolve those conflicts and come out with an approval and also community goodwill?
You know, Patrick, what's interesting about how you just described that is if someone's listening, they probably just assume that your tactics are to come in and undermine, push away, belittle, and just force something through. But what you've just explained is that people are resistant to change, and where you help people that want to bring a project into a community is finding that common ground and being able to help them articulate and communicate so that the whole community understands what's going on, and that you use that resistance to change to kind of ease the tension and move into a situation where everyone ends up winning. Is that right?
That's true. That's absolutely correct. And that's part of the reason why we're here talking today. What I learned as a mayor for 3 years and then as a consultant for the next 20 is that there's what's called the notice and hearing process, where you have to go through a certain series of getting your ticket punched in an application process. And it's very legal, it's very logical, and it's very linear. That's where you have your planners and your land use lawyers helping a developer, get approvals for rezoning or entitlements or site plans of that nature. But in my experience, the NIMBY exists outside of that very rigid, archaic system. NIMBYism is very emotional, it's very political, it's very chaotic. and it drums up a lot of conflict, demonizing unnecessarily a lot of sustainable real estate projects. And what I mean by that, these are projects that are harmonious with the environment. They're complementary to the communities, and they create jobs. They have economic benefits, and there's a disconnect that happens between those two paradigms of the legal and the political, and in resulting in a lot of misinformation that's carried out in this grapevine. And no one's better for it. So that's why I'm brought in as a consultant by the developers typically to build bridges and to rebuild impressions that are accurate and based on fact, not fiction.
So you mentioned that you were a mayor for a handful of years, but you've been a consultant with SL7 Consulting now for a long time. How did you become involved? How did you cross from being a public servant to seeing the issue and helping developers kind of fill in that gap and be successful instead of being rebuked away unfairly by communities and for their projects?
Yeah, great question. And I kind of fell into it. You know, I got a call from a friend of mine who was working. He was the president of a local chamber in South Florida, and he called me and said, "Look, there's a project here." He saw me speak on the issue somewhere, and so he called me and said, "Look, there's a developer and a project that we really want to see pass here, and the public relations firm that they use just put the project, a $180 million project, in jeopardy." And I say, "Well, what happened?" Apparently, that the public relations firm that they were using, there was a mayor who was a swing vote at the time and was waffling on whether or not he was going to vote in favor of the project. And so I guess it frustrated the public relations operative that they had, who went ahead and emailed the city manager at the time and saying, quote unquote, "The mayor is an asshole," in caps.
Oh my!
End quote. And anyone who does this work, and this is, this would be your audience and any investors, is it's a public record. Any communications with City Hall is a public record, and you can imagine what hit the fan after that happened. And so I was brought into a serious situation, and not just from the application process and the mayor voting, but also this was such a toxic project that it was on the ballot. There was a citizen petition that got this project put on the ballot, and that was even a compound problem. But long story short, that's how I was brought in. And 2 years later, we got the approval, not only City Hall, but we defeated it on the ballot, and we had a 5-0 vote. And so that was my cutting my teeth on a high profile project. And from that point forward, I was considered a consultant that would help neutralize NIMBYism.
Interesting. So you went from a person literally calling the mayor an a-hole in a communication to fast forward your involvement 2 years later, because these are longer processes, to a 5-0 unanimous vote to be able to move forward. And that just seems incredible or amazing. So, Patrick, it's very evident why you've been awarded several Public Relations Society of America awards, why Influence Magazine calls you a great communicator, why Campaigns and Elections Magazine labeled you a mover and shaker. That all makes sense just from that one story alone. But I'm sure you have a variety of stories about all of your fights against NIMBYism. And that brings me to one of the reasons why we're having this conversation today, is that you've put together a new book, and it's titled Never Lose to NIMBY Opposition Again. Master the secret strategies and solutions that turn NIMBY crisis into your finest hour. So, Patrick, give us a little bit of a preview of what are some of those secrets and strategies that helped you go from the mayor as an a-hole to a unanimous vote that we might find in your new book, Never Lose to NIMBY Opposition Again.
Sure. A couple things to tee that up. Most developers try. Most projects do get approved without any incident, but that is increasingly eroding. The odds of not having the opposition or neighborhood resistance or neighbor concerns turning into NIMBYism, that's becoming less and less because of the digital age, because of social media. Any project now can be in the crosshairs. And so that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, is to help developers and applicants and land use professionals not only come out of a crisis stronger than they were before, but also to preempt and prevent crises. And that's the genesis of the book. Over the last 20 years of experience, I have found that there are a lot of causes to NIMBY that are hiding in plain sight, which I call secrets or NIMBY X factors. One of which, as I already talked about, is the notice and hearing process ironically was developed for citizen participation to have more community education. It does the exact opposite with its bureaucratic notices and rigid, archaic systems in place. It creates gossip. It creates misinformation that is harmful to the applicant. And another X factor is conflict is what generates negative publicity. Conflict is what gets elected officials really nervous about supporting a project, especially during an election year. So conflict is a key element in determining the future of your project, whether it's going to be delayed, disrupted, or ultimately defeated, which could cost you millions of dollars. And so my book is not just tactics or strategies, but also understanding these X factors and also understanding the nature of change. Why do we fear change as part of our human condition? Brett Franklin said famously, there's two absolutes in life. There, death and taxes. I would say he forgot to add one, and that is another one. A third is change. Change is something that's inevitable, and we typically resist it, especially when there's new development being proposed that could change the character of our community, quote unquote, bring in more pollution, more traffic, whatever the accusations are. It creates obstacles that are unnecessary, but you can successfully overcome them with the right strategies and tactics that are in this book that I put together. And I'm happy to talk more about those specifics.
That's fantastic. So did you write this book because, as you just mentioned, with social media, with so many other ways to create that negative environment that really leads to a lot of problems, those controversies and conflicts that lead to problems with these projects, did that have something to do with why you wrote this book? Or is there something else that kind of motivated you to take your 20 plus years of experience and put it down in a very easy to read format so that people could come away never losing to that NIMBY opposition again?
Right. Well, just like anyone else, when I'm doing research and I want to be better at what I do, I look for books. I look for reports, I look for articles, and they're few and far between, surprisingly, in this space, in the real estate space. And what is out there is either old, outdated, or just inaccurate. A lot of these books have this theme of fighting fire with fire. And, when corporations are investing in, reputation management, cause marketing, ESG type of investments, they're getting advice, the old advice, the outdated advice, dangerous advice. Fight these communities with the same tactics that they're putting, direct mail, accusatory, allegations, and it gets in the press and it just compounds the problem. And so, through my consultation over the years and vetting and learning, I wanted to write this book about 10 years ago, but I procrastinated because I just didn't feel I was there yet. There's still so much more to learn. But finally I got to the point where I've had enough success with my clients, that, I'd like to work on every project that has an NIMBY crisis, because there's hundreds that are happening a week. I just can't get to them all. So this is the next best way of sharing my 20 years of experience and my toolkit with an industry that's been very good to me. So it's my time to give back.
That's awesome. So who is this book for? Who's the best person to pick up this book? Is going to get the most from it?
Well, there's a coalition of readers that I'm trying to reach and help. And that's the developers, that's land use professionals, such as lawyers, planners, engineers, brokers, even public relations, public affairs professionals who are out there trying to help developers. There's got to be a continuity of strategies and practices that are missing, and I'm hoping that the book, is able to reach them. And when I talk about developers, it's those who are building, master plan communities or mixed use, commercial, industrial. Your retail, you have energy both on the fossil fuel and also renewable energy. All these projects, all these different kinds of stripes of development encounter the same type of local resistance, either with angry neighbors or political activists that have a lot of angst. And so this book does transcend a lot of different stripes of industries with the common denominator of turning a NIMBY crisis into your finest hour.
That's fantastic. Patrick, what is the one takeaway, the one big idea that you want readers of your book to come away with?
That's simple. When a NIMBY hits the fan, that you can come out of it looking better than you did before the crisis. And what I mean by that is, something caused that crisis, and typically it's a misstep by the applicant. You miss something along the process, and so now you have to take some action, and that action is going to determine the fate of your project. And instead of trying to have the mindset, I got to fight my way out of this, the new paradigm is, how do I win the social and political capital necessary to not only mitigate this immediate crisis, but to get approvals for my projects and also community goodwill that it carries over to other projects in the future.
That's fantastic, Patrick. In an ever-increasing divisive environment, to hear you articulate that success comes from, engaging and winning over and creating that win-win for these communities and these projects, I really think that is timely. And it's something, quite frankly, that is different from what you see in other books in this space, where you're right. They advocate for fighting fire with fire, and that those old school tactics may have worked at one point, or it may have worked in one particular area. But it seems like what you're offering your readers and the greater in the greater marketplace is a set of new tactics that are thriving, that are working, and that you've been able to employ for over 2 decades now successfully.
I appreciate you saying that, Emilio. And look, this book is addressing really two places in the spectrum. To have some top-down strategies going all the way up to the C-suite leadership, but also the bottom-up successes for those who are in the field executing the applications. And so my goal is to have a continuity of practices that are not just beneficial for one project or one region, that developers could apply across their markets. And so this is a book that really starts laying down a foundation for best practices, or what I like to call better best practices, that will ultimately reduce the risk of community opposition and amplify corporate reputation. That's a win-win for all parties.
If you're looking for those better best practices, then you're going to want to get your hand on Patrick Slevin's new book, Never Lose to NIMBY Opposition Again. Master the secrets, strategies, and solutions that turn NIMBY crisis into your finest hour. Patrick, if a listener is tuned in and they want to know how they can make sure to never lose the NIMBY ever again, how can they get a hold of you, learn more about what you do, maybe engage with SL7 Consultants? What's the best way to get a hold of you online?
Well, certainly go to the website, which is my name, patrickslevin.com, and that's S as in Sam, L-E-V as in Victor, I-N.com. Or look me up and connect with me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a fantastic platform for building relationships and referrals. And that's at Patrick Slevin with Patrick Slevin SL7. You should find me there, and happy to talk shop and see how I can help one way or the other, even if it just comes to introducing mutual friends or acquaintances.
I appreciate that, Patrick, and I thank you for being with me today on this edition of Business Innovators Radio. We talked with Patrick Slevin at patrickslevin.com. His new book, Never Lose to NIMBY Opposition Again. You should, if you're listening and are even remotely interested, or if you're a developer yourself and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that put you in trouble when it comes to rolling out a new project, then you need to connect with Patrick on LinkedIn. I know him to be very active on LinkedIn. And what I really like and appreciate about you, Patrick, is that you're very giving on LinkedIn. I've seen you put out some valuable content, engage in one-on-one conversations, and really point people in the right direction. And you act as a tremendous resource. So I appreciate for being on the episode today. And I wish you the best of luck with the book. And everyone, patrickslevin.com, and get a copy of Never Lose to NIMBY Opposition Again. Thanks a lot for your time, Patrick.
Thank you, Vilio. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.